Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I can't believe it's the last Tech Tuesday of the year. I'm not quite exactly sure where the year actually went, but here we are. My name is Veronica Farmer. In addition to leading the marketing efforts for Wesley Clover International, I'm your host for Tech Tuesdays. They're made possible by Terry Matthews and the Wesley Clover Foundation, whose philanthropic support is committed to advancing our community, our well-being, our growth in the tech community. I would like to pay respect to the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, who are the traditional guardians of the land. We acknowledge their long-standing relationship with this territory, which remains unceded. We honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and their valuable past and present contributions. Tonight is about being courageous about mental health. Many of us have our stories regarding mental illness. For me, and many times in my life, I have felt utterly helpless while I watched loved ones suffer. As a young girl, I watched with great confusion my father, my hero, suffer in silence. Even now, at the age of 93, and he says he's healthy, happy, and wise, so there's a chance for all of us, he still has trouble talking about what he describes as a weakness. He's part of a generation that was paralyzed by the fear and stigma of depression. As a mother, I've spent years fighting an undertow of pain and helplessness, while my child, my sunshine, suffered, but not this time in silence, an absolute roller coaster ride of many talks and tears. Having supported both loved ones along their healing journeys, I do know that the first step starts with a courageous conversation. Mental health matters, a bit of a cliche, but it's an important one. It matters in tech companies, startups, multinationals. It matters in every workplace, period. And although prioritizing mental health is an important conversation to have, it's only the first step. The goal is to build an empathetic, strongly connected community with accessible resources that will help us build awareness and, more importantly, resilience. And could we point some chairs? There's lots of chairs over on this side. If you want to wander through the maze, lots of chairs over here. This is why I am excited to welcome the Dare to Be Vulnerable project and its founder, my dear friend, Susan Blaine, to Tech Tuesday. Susan is a survivor of her own personal journey and a fierce advocate for sharing and supporting stories to bust stigma and the shame around mental illness. I'm very proud to be a Dare to Be Vulnerable board member, and I'd like to acknowledge my Dare to Be Vulnerable board members and others in the room that are supporters. So tonight, we aim to create a safe and supportive environment to talk about mental health, and hopefully, with your help, foster a culture of compassion and understanding with our tech and business community.
We're hugging. Am I on? Am I on?
You can click too.
I can click too?
Yeah, you can click. I'll get out of the way here.
Whoop. No, not that fast. There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Blaine. I'm the founder of the Dare to Be Vulnerable project. And before I start, I have to take 3 big breaths to help me regulate my nervous system. So you can join me or you can watch me. And I'm going to take 3 big breaths, okay? In. Out. I'm going to close my eyes, pretend I don't see anybody. One more. I always feel so much better on that 3rd breath. On the out breath, it helps me regulate my nervous system. Many of you may wonder why I'm the founder of the Dare to Be Vulnerable project. This is what depression, anxiety, and mild PTSD looks like. That's a picture of me, if you were wondering. When I started this work, it was from an idea, but it was birthed from my own trauma. But when I look back on my life and I think, was it just the trauma, or have I been dealing with my mental health challenges for some time? And I have. I was depressed as a teenager. In my early 20s, I had suicidal ideation. I had my daughter when I was 25, and I didn't know it at the time, but I suffered from postpartum depression. And I made some pretty big life decisions at that time for myself, and I probably would have made some different decisions had I known I was struggling and asked for help. If I look at each decade, when I spent the last 15 years of my career at the Ottawa Business Journal, and I worked very hard day and night. I suffered a burnout in 2012. But it wasn't until 2019 when I suffered a real trauma that I really began to wake up to mental health and mental health challenges and how important it is to take care of our mental health. September 14th, 2019, I refer to it as the day my world blew up. Through an act of betrayal, I lost everything. I lost my savings. I lost my home. I lost my relationship. And I was homeless for 20 months. Not exactly where you expect to be at 54 years of age. It sent me down a very, very dark path, and I was suicidal. I like to show this picture. It's me and my dog, Harley. Harley's been through it all, but this is after 20 months of being homeless, thanks to friends and family. I'm sitting on the step of a place where I signed my lease, and I've been there ever since, and it's been a great place of healing for me. I was hospitalized in, check out the date, March 11th, 2020, 2 days before COVID struck the world, because I remember it was Friday the 13th. I don't remember much about those first couple of days in the hospital, but I was hospitalized, and it was because I had a courageous conversation with my best friend, Judy. And I had the courage to share with her what was going on inside and the dark thoughts that I was having. And she said this to me, "Susan, you need more help than I can give you, and you need to be hospitalized." I cannot tell you how hard that was to hear, but it landed where it needed to land. The next day, she held my hand, and we walked into the Queensway Carleton Hospital, and I spent the next couple of weeks there. And that's where I began my healing journey. And I've had many, many, many conversations one-on-one since I started this project. About 250 one-on-one conversations with people, and I ask everybody this question. How many of us do you think struggle with our mental health or have a mental health challenge? And out of the 250 people that I spoke to, about 99%, there was a few people that knew this statistic, and this is a 2021 statistic. I'd like to see the 2022. I think we're going to move a notch here. But some people said, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, and then the rest said everybody, right? Because we all struggle. And there's some new statistics recently that say that everyone will have a mental health challenge before the age of 40. This project is really for those 3 people sitting in the seats. So that one person that slumped over in the chair, that was me. I count as a statistic because I was hospitalized and on medication and worked with a psychiatrist. So I'm a statistic. But this project is for the 3 people sitting in the seat that are struggling in silence. Why do we struggle in silence? And why did I struggle in silence for so many years and not say anything? Stigma and discrimination. And out of the people that I spoke to, it's interesting to me that people will share with me one-on-one because I go first. And I share about my story. And then they say, me too. I'm struggling with anxiety, or this happened. So it starts with that courageous conversation. And, you know, this stigma and discrimination has been going on a long time. We did our first event. This is number 8 this year. This is our 8th event. And we did the first one in January. And I had Tim Kluk. He's the CEO of the Ottawa Hospital Foundation, come up on stage and have a courageous conversation with me. And he said, Susan, 20 years ago, he was CEO of the Royal Ottawa Hospital Foundation, and they launched a campaign called You Know Who I Am. And some of you might know that Daniel Alfredson participated in that campaign. That was 20 years ago, trying to bust the stigma and discrimination. And here we are in 2023, still trying to do it. Some statistics, 60% of people surveyed by mentalhealthatwork.org say that stigma and discrimination are more damaging than the mental health symptoms that they have. 35% of people surveyed said that they would be less likely to get promoted if they had depression. Well, let me tell you, I worked my entire career up the ladder to acting CEO of Ottawa Business Events, dealing with anxiety and depression. And I can assure you, I am not incompetent. You're supposed to chuckle at that, because everybody's so serious, so serious. 47% of people find their most stressful part of their day is at the workplace. This is one of the most disturbing statistics. 75% of the suicides in this country, and it's on the rise, 75% are men. Women attempt 3 to 4 times more often. Men are more successful. You know, we all have a mental health. That's not something that somebody else is experiencing. We have a mental health just like we have a brain health, a heart health, a gut health, a physical health. We have a mental health. The question is, where are we on that spectrum? I was in the red zone in September of 2019, and I was in the red zone for quite some time. You can have a mental illness of depression or anxiety or mild PTSD and still have good mental health. It's something that we need to think about, like we have strategies for our physical health, our gut health. We need to have good strategies for our mental health. You know, we've been through a lot. We've been through COVID. We've been through isolation, loss, war in the Middle East. We're all struggling in some way, and it affects our mental health. The World Health Organization recently, I think it was a month and a half ago, declared a loneliness pandemic worldwide. I think we've kind of swung the pendulum the other way. Now we've isolated ourselves. So a lot of people still working from home. And we've become lonelier. We've become disconnected. And that's having a negative impact on our mental health. The holiday season, not easy for a lot of people as we go into the holiday season. It used to be my least favorite time of the year. The last 2 holidays I've spent by myself. This year I'm going to spend with my Western family in Edmonton. I'm super excited about that. But it's not an easy time of year for a lot of people. Here's the good news. And this is what this project is all about, is having these courageous conversations around our mental health. It's okay not to be okay. In fact, vulnerability, we look at vulnerability through the lens of mental health. To be vulnerable, you need to be courageous. And you cannot be courageous without being vulnerable. But when we hear from other people who have overcome great adversity and who have the courage to share their stories, there's something that happens. I say there's something magical that almost happens. I know you're nodding your head, Eric, because your podcast is all about that. We're inspired. We're inspired by people who have the courage to dare to be vulnerable. And when we witness that, something happens within inside of us. So this is the part of the program where we're going to demonstrate the power of vulnerability and having courageous conversations. And we have 3 great guests coming up today to join us on stage. And then we're going to have an open mic component as well and invite people up to the mics that are positioned in the room to share, as an open mic suggests, not to sing today, unless you have a great talent. You can have a little singing, you're volunteering. One thing I wanted to say about workplace before we get in, because this is a business audience. And there's some statistics here, and like all statistics, statistics are lower than actual reality. Because not everybody's going to put up their hand. I don't know if anybody here has been called recently on their cell phone and asked to participate in a mental health survey. Anybody? No. So, but the statistics, speak to a number, but 12 billion days are lost every year due to poor mental health. 54% of people say that they're most impacted by stigma in the workplace. 70% of people say that their manager has more impact on their mental health than their doctor or their therapist. So managers, be good to your people. And 72% of founders, I'm in that category, I am a founder, I'm bootstrapping a startup, experience mental health challenges. 72% of founders. So that's a pretty high statistic. But hearing from others takes great courage, and I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. And Simon talks about the ability to be vulnerable is one of the greatest and most difficult leadership lessons any of us can learn, but the most important and the most powerful. When people see us as human, it allows them to be human too. And we need more of that in the world. So we have a motto here at the Dare to Be Vulnerable Project. We go first. So it's our responsibility as leaders to go first. So with no further ado, we have our first Courageous Conversation panelist. Kevin Ford is the CEO of Calian Group. He is a son. He's a father. He's a husband. He's a brother. And Kevin has also seen the darkest of depressions with the loss of his father and his brother-in-law to suicide. And Kevin is also someone who experiences anxiety. Please welcome Kevin Ford. Right here, right beside me in the hot seat. You remember that.
All right.
Because Kevin's been with me in the hot seat a couple times.
There's a lot of people here.
A lot of people here, a little more than last time. Do you know that this 8th event and the number of people in the audience today, we will have done this work to 1,000 people this year.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
So let's talk about anxiety.
You know, it's when you asked me to be part of this.
Gonna give you some water too.
Yeah, thanks. It's you can tell I'm dealing with a bit of a cold.
Yeah. Open that for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think for me, the reason I wanted to be part of this on the Dare to be Vulnerable and having courageous discussions and conversations, you know, when you lose people, like I lost my father and my brother-in-law to suicide. And at that time, they didn't have an opportunity to talk about it. And I know they would still be here if they had an opportunity to talk about it. So I'm here to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, you know, in anxiety, and anybody dealing with anxiety, you know, yeah, a few of us.
And if you don't want to put up their hand.
If you don't want to put up their hand. You know, to me, it's just something that it triggers. There's triggers for it. There's different things. There's different reasons why you have anxiety. But it's all okay. It's okay. I run a pretty big company. I've got a great team. They know that we're there to help each other.
Yeah.
Because we talk about it. And I just want to let people know that on this journey now to, I think we're almost 750 million, nobody has ever questioned my ability to lead, to be there for them, to run a company because I have quote-unquote anxiety. If anything, once I actually talk about it, I think they see me as a stronger leader.
100%.
And they also want to figure out how they can help. So I'm here to talk about it, and I'm happy to be here. And this woman's amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you're right. I mean, once we name it and we say it, I mean, I have more success getting men to talk about their mental health challenges than I do women. And the women, and they're people I know personally, leaders, and they say, Susan, I just can't. I can't. I say, why? Because they're going to judge me. They're going to think I'm not capable. I'm not competent. But you're saying that's not the case. I don't find that at all. In fact, and I know this happened to you when we did this last time, you were inundated with people thanking you for stepping up and being courageous.
You know, for me, I guess I'm still perturbed, whatever the right word is, that we're still not able to talk about this. It's like, why is that? Why is that?
Well, stigma and discrimination are the two words, but people fear judgment. They fear they'll be looked at differently.
Well, I'm here to tell you that you're not going to be looked differently. You don't need to go bald, by the way, to be looked differently. I can tell you right now that the discussions you can have, and if we can have one person coming out of this event tonight that has a discussion maybe they haven't had, then it's a massive success. Because for me, that discussion, your discussions, are very powerful. And I see people shaking their heads, everyone's nodding their heads, because they know this is long overdue for us to move past this, to be the best version of who we are with all of our challenges, and to accept it, embrace it, and let's move on.
Yeah. It doesn't discriminate, right?
It does not.
It doesn't matter who you are, if you're a CEO or a bus driver or cultural background, sexual orientation. It doesn't discriminate. It's a level playing field. Talk about the Me Too movement. It's a whole other level.
Yeah, true.
Right?
True, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. We're going to have some more discussion.
Great.
And you're going to move to the end.
I
but
will.
You're not off the hook.
I always,
you know that.
I always listen to this
You know.
woman. I never question it. Happy to move to the end.
And I'll just take the mic from you because I'm going to introduce our next courageous conversationist, panelist. And we got a woman representing. Susan Richards. Okay, wait. Well, come on up. She's the co-founder of Number Crunch. She's a mom, a wife, a daughter, and a sister. And Susan, who also struggles with imposter syndrome and self-doubt. Oh, I'm so glad we're talking about this. Hey, Susan, way to represent. Here you go.
Oh, Thank you. Thank you
Are
for
you
having
nervous?
me.
Are you nervous?
I am. I can just say that, like, my blood is electrified and it's coursing through. There's like something like that going on.
It's called adrenaline.
So, yeah, maybe. I felt many things, but I'm definitely turned on and present here for you all today.
Wow. And you and I, when we were talking, it was, when we talk, because I do talk to people before I invite them up on stage. And, you know, it was a little, you were a bit apprehensive.
Yes.
Why? Tell us why, please.
Yeah, because, well, the irony in this, because Susan was so gracious as to invite me to do this, and she said, you know, how it rolls. And I said, oh, well, before you get into that, I don't think I'm a good person for this. This is not, like, there are better people to come up and do this and represent. And I kept going.
She did.
And because that is exactly what goes on in my head. Never good enough to represent. I feel there are people, so I'm not the one who has sought help. I am the one, I don't even know what I would classify myself as. Just truly, in my head, my default is not me, because there are better people, and I would be insulting people by taking up that seat and sharing the voices in my head. Well, that's the voices in my head all the time.
She feels she's an imposter sitting up here. Yeah, give her some love. I love that you bring this up, Susan, because I've had many people out of the 250 conversations who say, well, I haven't been through anything like you've been through, Susan. Let me tell you, everybody's experience is unique. It doesn't matter if it's more dramatic than somebody else's. It's like a fingerprint. No two are the same. Even other people that have suffered through trauma or maybe been homeless or had lost everything like I have, even their experience is not the same as mine. But I can tell you what is the same. If you experience imposter syndrome, self-doubt, lack of self-worth, anxiety, depression, the emotional journey that we go through feeling those things is the same.
Yeah. I mean, we are all human.
Yes, amen.
And mental health, like, I'm still learning words, vocabulary. So I volunteer on the board of directors of the Institute of Mental Health Research Institute, because I'm very interested in this topic. I'm interested in learning. I'm interested in helping people. I've lost a relative to schizophrenia. I have 3 sons. I lost the relative as my sons were growing up, and I still have great fear for the genetic inclination of mental health ailments and how they can be triggered, and all of that. Alzheimer's, dementia is in the family. Father died of stroke. Had suicide awareness very young of age in my small town, where one of the first deaths I experienced was of a friend who committed suicide, who wasn't able to be their full self in our town. And so I've been about prevention for myself, and I developed all of these skills and habits. I was that kid in class who, if I was a people pleaser, I would say I'm a recovering people pleaser, but that would indicate that I've maybe gone a day without people pleasing. So I'm not even recovering. It's something I know about myself. It can be powerful, and it can also be a foe in my life. And so when I was grade 3, grade 4, if I didn't get the mark that I wanted, I'd feel sad. And I have one of those faces if I start to cry or feel sad. I look like I've been crying. I get red blotchy. If any of you sisters or brothers out there have that red blotchy face kind of thing.
Yeah.
Terrible when you're trying to be hidden in a classroom. So I learned early on about tactics. You can actually do nursery rhymes in your head to shift over to the other side of the brain to calm the calm the emotion. You can also count backwards by 3s. Maybe that's why I'm an accountant. So I started early developing habits, now I call them rituals, and have developed a very, I would call it thick skin, which also I think led to the CFO work. So I built all this stuff up, but what goes on in the back of my head to prepare me for anything is maybe insane. Like, honestly.
Well, we all have our processes, right? And we're going to talk some more
Yeah.
about that. Veronica's going to come up here, and we're all going to sit here, and we're going to share some of our best practices with you all. So maybe
good.
what we'll do now is I'll ask you to move up, and
Yeah.
we'll bring up our last courageous conversationalist. Thank you, Susan. And let me introduce you to Mr. Rudy Asir. Rudy is the CEO and co-founder of MindStride. Keep your eyes on the lookout for some pretty exciting things happening with that organization. He's the co-founder and CEO of MindStride. He's also the board chair of the Dare to Be Vulnerable project. He's a husband, a son, a brother, and he's a father-to-be with a little peanut growing in there. Rudy has experienced childhood trauma and the loss of his sister to suicide during the pandemic. Please welcome Rudy Asir.
All right. Well, I guess the surprise is out.
Yes, I let it out of the bag.
And it's going to be
and
a boy.
It's a boy. Woo!
All right.
So excited for you. It's been quite the year.
It has. It has.
Yeah,
for
now
sure.
you're back in startup mode.
We are. That's definitely some challenging moments there.
Yeah.
And definitely relate with the audience. You know, we were originally talking about, seed to Series A psychology, and it's a challenge. So definitely a lot of sympathy and understanding for those in the startup phase. It can definitely be dark and lonely.
Very lonely.
Trying to raise capital and project the best version of your product and yourself to the community to get them to engage in what you're doing, and it's definitely a tough go. So happy to be here at Tech Tuesday. Thank you to everyone for coming, and it's amazing. Thank you to Terry for continuing to support these events.
Oh, hey, Terry.
I'm also highly vulnerable.
Are you?
Yes.
Well, we have an extra chair for you.
Oh.
With Veronica.
Yes.
That says everything.
Oh, that's it. That's it. But you've got the best.
Thank God I'm imperturbable.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Oh.
So let's talk a little bit about your struggles.
Yeah, I mean, as it relates to sort of what's going on in my life and, being with you guys this evening, I can relate to a lot of different things. And for me, my mental health sort of issues or things that I identified really started at an early age. Both my parents were alcoholics. It was a pretty difficult environment, a lot of different abuse situations in the household. And, at the same time, you can develop some resentment towards some of that stuff. And you can go through life being like, I wish something was different, or I wish, things went a different way. But, as you go through the different phases of life, and if you reflect on, we're all a product of our circumstances, and we're all a product of what's available to us from a resource perspective. I am who I am because of what, I've experienced. And as traumatic as some of those experiences were, they've also defined and carved out who I am today. And for those of you who know me, I don't do anything, lightly. I got into running, and I thought 5 kilometers was fun. And, did the half marathon, and then a marathon, and then 100K, and now I do ultra marathons. And it's the same thing in business. I am so laser focused on user experience and providing the best probable value for the client base. It's innate, it's in my DNA, but it's a product of trauma, right? And what it's from is that as a child, I would do significant things for what reason?
For attention.
Right? So I became really good at that. And I became a serial people pleaser. I'm still working on it. And you're right, by virtue of disclosing a serial people pleaser, you're people pleasing. So I'm horrible at that. But, I look at these things and these experiences as I've gone through them and say, okay, how are we going to deal with that? So, 2 years ago, I was running a $100 million company, flying 100 miles an hour, doing all sorts of, wonderful things, but got completely burnt out. So much disconnection between myself and, the founding team and the board and different things that we were doing, where I literally was on an airplane shivering, leaving from Germany from a logistics conference to Paris, and the words just flew out of my thought, my consciousness, and so unconsciously, I literally wrote my resignation letter, and I landed and I sent it, and I felt strange. It was probably one of the most difficult moments of my life, but my peer group, which one of them is here, my good friend Kevin, and Peter and John Sicard, Peter sent me a note saying, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Well, funny, I'm at 40,000 feet flying across the Atlantic." He goes, "Well, what are you doing tonight?" I said, "I don't know." He says, "Well, John's opening a new building. Come on out." So literally, I landed that afternoon, and I was in the presence of some great people. And I share that story because of the power of community and building people around you that you can relate to. Because as simple as those words were, Kevin might not even realize, but he said something along the lines, "Wow, you've never looked better." I was like, "Really? I've never felt shittier." Right? I just quit a $100 million job. Like, I walked away from $1 million plus salary, plus all this stuff, because I just couldn't stand it anymore. So it's important, I think, to stay connected, to your community and understand that, sometimes, as dark as the situations that you are going through, it's also potentially can one day become your superpower.
Yes.
And that's really what I want
So
to share.
So
share with you guys.
Can we just talk about that for a minute? Because
Yeah.
when I reached out to Rudy,
Oh boy.
let me see, when was it? June 2022?
Yep.
Okay. So I reached out to Rudy on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I'm looking for some leaders who are willing to talk about mental health, and can we jump on a Google chat and talk about it?" And you were on the Camino Trail.
I was, yes. So literally I resigned on day one, and then day two, I'm either going to go in for some, corporate burnout thing. But I had a spiritual calling. I said, you know what? I'm going to go to Spain, and I'm going to walk to Camino, because that's just what I do. And my phone's literally binging this whole time, Susan, being like, "Hey, come on out." I'm like, "Listen, I'm trying to
talk about mental health.
I'm trying to figure out my shit right now. I don't have time for mental health. I got to deal with my own stuff." But she's persistent, and lo and behold,
Here you are.
Here we are today.
And you were launching.
I've just co-founded a mental health project that's near and dear to my heart. As you mentioned in the intro, I did lose my sister to bipolar disease. I'll never forget that Monday afternoon where my mom called me, and the Ottawa police had just finished knocking on our door and advised my mom that my sister had taken her life. That was traumatic. And, we dealt with a lot of that. So the initiative behind this is not only just to sort of, do something in her name, but at the same time to really make an effort to make mental health more accessible to Canadians. So I'm proud to be here with my co-founding team from the medical community, the technology community, where we've come together to develop a solution from early assessments to light interventions and continuous monitoring. And that's our step one in our new venture. But it's really about making it more accessible, because too many people live in the dark during their journey. And, I share it with you guys. Like, no matter what it is you're going through, I'll leave it at this. I've got this, my tooth story. I've got this tooth in my office. It's a megalodon tooth. It's 12 million years old. Who cares, right? The point is that when you hold this item in your hands, and you're all welcome to come visit me, when you hold this item in your hand, you realize one thing, that we are absolutely nothing in the spectrum of time. All we have right now is right here, right now, this moment with each other. And I encourage you, even at your darkest time, you have something to contribute to this world. And I hope that, you take that to heart.
Thank you. Veronica! I'm going to sit down. I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to sit down on the panel, and Veronica's going to go between us. And we're going to share some of our best practices that we do to strengthen our mental health or navigate through when we are having a challenge, which is a lot of days for me.
I see people nodding, people clapping. So there is a resonance here with what we are talking about. And I think this part is probably the most important. And in fact, I think Susan Richards was off and running in terms of her points. So I'm actually going to start. I'm going to mix things around. I'm going to mix and ask Susan Richards. So you talked about a thick skin. Talked about the imposter syndrome and the things that you do with respect to navigating how you get through that. Can you talk a little bit? And really, the point of this is there things we can learn from this? So talk about your process, your thick skin, what you do.
Yeah, okay. So I have a number of rituals that I do, which is starting in the morning. I get up. I have battery lit candles that come on at the same time, 5:30 every morning. I meditate. I go for a walk for an hour and talk to my best friend who's in PEI literally every morning of the day. We started that process as soon as the pandemic hit. We said double down on self-care. So it gives me an outlet to talk to someone. I met her when I was 4, lifelong friendship. We don't all have to talk to our best friends every day, but it's great to connect. You can do it while you walk. So I get 10,000 steps a day. I'm on like 120 days of that in a row. So I do all those things before my day begins. I started doing a morning ritual to get space from my busy household. And take that time to ready for myself for the day. So I do a lot of readying. I try to put space in my day. I've found, like literally, I'll lie down in between meetings to clear my head. If I can let myself, that sort of feeling when you're falling asleep, I can get to that now pretty quickly, like within 10 minutes. And that gives me a mental reset. I try to get mental resets a lot. Because I talk to business owners all the time who are stressed out, I feel their stress when they're running out of cash. I feel for them. And I wish I was vulnerable enough to encourage them to share more about their mental health. Maybe following this I will. But I'm very mindful of ensuring that I'm in the best possible place to show up for everybody that I show up for. I also rely on roles. So people talk about roles as a con. I think, and for me, it's a bit of a superpower. Like, what am I showing up? When I get home from work, I'm showing up in my family. I put other things aside. When I show up at work, I'm showing up in work mode. I just recently joined a tech group, and I told them in my first meeting, this is the first time I'm ever showing up as all of me. Like, look out, I don't know what this is going to be. It's a hot mess, but I'm always in a role, and that role is a nice protection. I think right now, with where we are with social media and articles, there's especially on owners of like business owners and leaders, you're expected to be everything for everybody. And honestly, I'm not a parent to my staff. I wish I talked more about this at work, but I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm okay with where I'm at on that journey. I want to do better, but I have to. So these are all the things that I do to feel good. I've learned, and this has taken me, I'm 51, it's taken me a long time to believe that it's not selfish, or whatever you want to call it, it's the best for everybody that I engage with too. So giving permission for yourself to feel good and then show up, I think, is really critical. Then I don't see things as failure. That's another thing. I'm not a Pollyanna, but I see the opportunity in everything. My kids got in a car accident, and I was like, God, fender benders save lives. Like, if you want a quote from me, fender benders save lives. When I see a fender bender, I'm like, oh, that's too bad, but that saved their life. Because it causes you to have that voice tell you, pay attention, slow down. And I think mental health-wise, we get hit all the time. I personally can freeze. I'll stop talking here because I'm taking too much time, but I can freeze in a moment when the emotions hit and I have to make a critical decision, and I just try to, quickly get to a feel good as fast as I can so that I can show up for the people I'm trying to please.
Wow, thank you for that. Yeah. There's that idea of roles and what we do as we shape shift, many of us in our different roles from family, profession, and what have you. And there's that moment in time, if you can just recall for a moment and just hold and say, now I'm walking into that next step. So that's important. Kevin.
I think there's a consistency in what you said in just planning for time for yourself. And I've learned that. My assistant, I talk to her, it's make sure I got time in my trainer. Twice a week I'm into the trainer. Make sure I'm keeping myself accountable because frankly, the biggest challenge I have is busy. And when you're busy, sometimes you forget about yourself. You get lost in busy.
Yeah.
And you need somebody reminding you that you're important, and busy at some point is not going to be good if you can't be here long term. So number one, spend the time, get it in your calendar, and make sure that you're prioritizing that. And number two for me is I'm a big music fan. So I play guitar. I have boys that play guitar. My son's a rock star over in Sweden. He's touring the world playing music. So I find something that has nothing to do with my work, and I make sure I spend time in that space, wherever that may be. And I think it's important to have that. Whatever that may be for you, find time at a space that has nothing to do with the office, with work, that allows you just to exercise different parts of your brain and hopefully reconnect with who you are, not just who you want to be.
I love that.
I love that too.
Mm-hmm. Rudy?
Yeah, I think for me, outside of exercise, which I've just loved doing my entire life, I've always been a sort of a solo athlete because I just enjoy the journey, I enjoy the pain, the challenge, everything that's surrounded around it. I find it euphoric. But I would say, one of the greatest life hacks that's out there, I would say, is a therapist. And I've been seeing therapists throughout my entire career. I used to be a professional athlete once upon a time, and I was surrounded with performance coaches and all sorts of things and psychologists on how to get the fraction of a second out of my time for what I was doing, and it was great. And then I went into the real world, I guess, and I lost all that support. I had a strength coach, nutritionist, all these things, and I expected to be like the world's greatest leader on like this archaic structure. So I think that having a therapist and having a team around you, whether it's a group of peers or tech group as an example, or different areas, I think really, really helps. And if I was to expand on that briefly, what's the greatest thing I got out of therapy? I would say acceptance of the environment. And for the programming folks that are in the room, you can code as much as you want, you can do all sorts of things, but sometimes you're in these situations of conflict and you find yourself agitated and you blame yourself and you go through some type of cycle that's going on there. But I leave you with this note to think that maybe the person on the other side is going through something that's more severe than you, and they're just expressing it differently. That has taken me, a long time to understand, because being a people pleaser, I want you to be happy. You're like, no, I'm pissed off. Yeah, but maybe we can fix this. No, we can't. Oh, come on. And it's very challenging as a leader because we have all these different tools that are available for us to manage, people at scale. And we have to be responsible with our leadership in a way to be understanding and empathetic. So I would say greatest life hack, therapists. They're fantastic.
Yep.
Okay. Susan?
Me? Okay. Got my list here.
Okay.
Well, the first thing, I just have a couple things here, and I echo making time for yourself. So I do spend a lot of time, quiet time. I journal, just to dump my thoughts onto paper. And there's something, yes, Dare to Be Vulnerable journals at the front, by the way, for a donation. You get one of those. But just writing, just slowing myself down. And I don't use the keyboard. I use a pen, and I write. And journaling is very, very helpful for me. The one thing that I've done, and I have not watched the news in 30 years.
You haven't consumed
No.
watched it or
I
consumed
don't
it?
watch it.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that through osmosis I don't get it through social media or hear things or through conversations, but I do not intentionally seek out the news. And I haven't, because I'm a very sensitive creature and I cannot take it. I cannot take being bombarded by the negativity out there. And I recently read something on social media, and it was just last night, and I wanted to share it. Turn off the news, go outside, breathe. We were never meant to carry the burdens of the world on our shoulders. And the news bombards us with that. It doesn't make me any less intelligent because I don't watch the news. I spend a lot of time with dogs. Dogs are my favorite people. I hike every day, Monday to Friday. During lunch hour, I have it blocked off on my calendar. I don't have a doggy bus, but I sure wish I did. I pick up dogs. I have a pack in my Jetta, and they all get seatbelted in, and off we go to Conroy Park. And I hike there for an hour every single day. And I say to people while I'm walking, you know, everybody's always happy, and I focus on the dogs. I have my phone with me, but it's shut off. Sometimes I have conversations on my phone, but very rarely. I listen to my feet crunching in the snow. It was so beautiful out there the last couple of days. It's like a winter wonderland. And that's my walking meditation every day. And the dogs help me focus on the moment. So I practice being present. And that's one of my strongest mental health practices. And I say to people while I'm out hiking with the dogs, and they say, "Oh, isn't this a beautiful day?" I said, "Oh, this is my favorite mental health practice." At first they look at me and then they say, "Yes, isn't it great?" Mm-hmm. And then I recently found another practice that we can all do, and it actually signals the vagus nerve and helps to calm us down, and that's humming. You know, just humming for a few minutes a day. I do that, and then my whole body like vibrates afterwards. You know, it's like that sound that your body as an instrument makes, and that humming has a very relaxing quality to it. So those are some of my best practices.